In Ireland, you see, as you pointed out, we have some producers groups, but ironically enough, and I'd like your input into this. How come producers groups in Ireland haven't been successful? That the groups that they have gone to, or this is especially in the beef sector, that they have gone to, would not recognise them or work with them, because generally a producers group, it's like as if I have one lamb or if I have 1,000 lambs, obviously they should be more interested in the 1,000 lambs. It hasn't been accepted or hasn't worked with in this country. Why would you think that?
This is a very interesting question, and we are trying to understand it, actually. What we see... Apologies. What we see very often is that we have more producer organizations, recognized producer organizations in the food and vegetable sector, because there have been more, there have been already in the past sector intervention programs supported by the CAP, and thus financial incentives have been provided to join a producer organization. This is less so in some other sectors, as you mentioned. At the European level, we have some conditions when it comes to recognition, but the responsibility, for example, for the recognition of a producer organization is at the national level. We are currently also reflecting how the role of producer organizations can be further strengthened, how the recognition can be simplified in order to provide more incentives for cooperation of farmers within a producer group, and in order to improve farmers' bargaining position in the supply chain.
I see you speak in your presentation where objectives may be covered under the sustainability agreement, a benefit from the exclusion. The objectives laid down in Article 210A will involve climate change mitigation and adaptation, as well as environmental protection, reduction in pesticide and antimicrobial resistance, animal health and welfare. Like, some of the stuff that's done up in Europe doesn't take into account the type of landscape that people produce things or produce food in all of our countries. The difference between Germany, land in Germany and land in parts of Ireland is like chalk and cheese. And I come from a part where the west of Ireland, there's a thing called rushes. And if you're not using sprays to try and keep them at bay, your land will go out of control in you, because our land quality wouldn't be good. And the danger is that with a lot of these, sustainability programs coming in, and, that some of those people really feel nearly pushed out of the system by EU directives or legislation.
Well, I can only comment on the sustainability objectives under Article 210A. Those have been chosen by the co-legislators.
By
the co-legislators, by the European Parliament specifically. This article has not been introduced by the Commission. So, during the last reform of the CAP, the Parliament proposed adding this article and has decided on the objectives. So this is why, for me, it is difficult to respond to your questions. In the guidelines, we explain what is considered, what kind of measures could be considered to fall within those environmental objectives. It also includes like improving resistance of soil to erosion. It also includes measures improving soil composition. So those objectives are, I would personally say, relatively flexible to take into account the different features in different member states. And of course, farmers know best what is good for their soil and for their landscape.
Just on the sustainability side of it, you're well aware of thankfully it's on hold at the moment, the nature restoration law in Brussels. But just say a farmer in the west of Ireland was producing beef on a peaty type soil that under the NRL, the nature restoration law, would be, they'd be saying that it should be re-wetted. And would that be viewed as not sustainable, and would that farmer be at a disadvantage under this?
Sorry, I didn't fully understand the link between the nature restoration law and the sustainability agreement. So what is mandatory for an individual farmer cannot be considered as sufficiently ambitious to benefit from the sustainability exclusion, from this exclusion. But if they are, and apologies for my not in-depth knowledge of the nature restoration law at this junction, but when it comes to laws that are mandatory and binding on the member states, this is not considered to be hindering the fact that there are agreements that go beyond standards that would be binding on individual farmers. And if there are no standards binding on individual farmers, then everything going beyond zero is better than nothing. And one would need to see on the basis of case-by-case assessment, whether this cooperation, this agreement is necessary, as I said before, at the individual level, and whether the restrictions to competition are necessary to achieve this objective.
Two final questions for you. Am I correct in saying you talked about the MEPs? Is it not the commission that do up all this first and then push it to the Parliament?
You're right that under normal conditions, the Commission is proposing a regulation. In this case, the Commission, in the context of the reform of the Common Agricultural Policy, proposed changes to the Common Agricultural Regulation, specifically to take out the sectoral interventions from the Common Markets Organization Regulation and to introduce them in a different legal basis, the regulation for strategic plan regulation. This, however, Parliament has the opportunity, when the Commission submits a proposal, to introduce amendments, and through those amendments, the Article 210A has been introduced by the European Parliament and accepted by the Council in the trilogue.
I would notice as well that as part of this on designated areas, there would be more restrictions under this. Would that be correct?
Sorry, I didn't understand.
Designated, if you had designated, there are certain areas in all countries designated under environmental law, and there would be more regulation on them in relation to pesticides. SACs is one type of a designation, NHAs is another type of a designation. Am I correct in saying that there'd be more regulation in relation to pesticides and use of those lands?
Yes, well, the question is, what does this regulation mean? Again, is it binding at the level of the farmers? Or is it binding on the regional authorities? I don't, if it's a standard, if it's a designation.
Just one thing, and sorry for interrupting you. In Ireland, we happen to own the land, thank God, but it might be moving a bit away. It's different to most of Europe, that we have our private property rights. So it's all the farmers that would own their land, but it is designated because of the likes of the Habitats Directive, and the NRL would be another piece of legislation coming from Europe. But the regulation is being put on it. And when you read the document that you were talking about, it would state very clearly from my reading of it, and I'm open to correction, that it would basically put more restrictions on designated areas in relation to the use of it and especially the pesticide side of it.
Well, if there is a certain standard imposed depending on specific land, on the farmer using this land, then indeed you would need to have a more ambitious sustainability agreement than maybe in other parts. Indeed. Okay,
and the final question, and thanks for your time, would be, in Ireland at the moment we have a new sustainable agreement being done. I think the European Commission has given the go-ahead to the new, basically it's grass-fed beef. It's coming in as a new offering. There'll be certain restrictions to it. It's like what do you call the groupings together? Do you know that we talked about earlier where farmers would have agreements with the co-ops or whatever. It would be like a better standard environmentally that our Board BIA would be over. It would be grass-fed beef is the name we have on it here, where the EU has given the go-ahead to it. But if you are doing something special or something extra as a farmer, and we're going to have our local, the body that's over it here, Board BIA. If you were doing something to produce an animal under certain spec, under certain, say, to have it grass-fed, which Ireland is a lot of, and not as much meal-fed, would you expect that those farmers would be better rewarded than someone not in it? Producers Group is the name I'm trying to think of, and I'm just after thinking of it. There's a grass-fed, Ireland has been recognised, or we have got a grass-fed producers group, a recognition. And would you imagine that that beef would be more attractive in Europe when it would have more sustainability and would have more terms and conditions to rearing it?
Well, it is difficult for me to judge whether it would be more attractive. It is for that, you would need to do a market study to understand what is the consumer demand. But when it comes again, whether you could do a sustainability agreement for that purpose, well, we had discussions with some stakeholders putting such initiatives forward, and for that you would need to argue that when you allow grazing of animals, this is, animal welfare. You would need to demonstrate it. You would need to demonstrate whether this is, a standard that would be binding, legally binding, mandatory. So, for example, we also consider that standards like organic are not mandatory because these are voluntary production methods. So they are not considered to be mandatory at EU or national level. Although you have a certain, you need to produce according to certain rules. So basically, I don't know whether what is the current situation. So this is something would require a more in-depth assessment, and also whether this would be more beneficial. For that, one would need to carry out a market study to understand what is the demand at the level of the consumers, and whether the consumers are, for example, willing to pay more for in such a situation.
Thank you for your time.